Conflicting reports began circulating after Iran announced that it had successfully struck a United States aircraft carrier with missile fire. According to the claim, several missiles had reached the vessel and caused major destruction. Within roughly the same hour, however, the United States military issued a firm denial, stating that no American carrier had been hit. Two completely different versions of events were suddenly competing for attention, leaving observers with an obvious conclusion: at least one side had to be wrong. In earlier decades, it might have been difficult to verify such claims quickly, but modern technology has changed that. Today, the oceans are watched constantly by satellites that record naval activity around the world. Large military ships cannot simply disappear or hide evidence of major damage, especially in an era where high-resolution imagery is available not only to governments, but also to private companies and independent analysts. If an aircraft carrier had truly been struck by ballistic missiles, the signs would be dramatic and almost impossible to conceal. Iranian officials described a scenario in which multiple missiles reached the ship. If such a strike had actually happened, the result would have been catastrophic. A modern aircraft carrier is enormous, with a flight deck stretching hundreds of meters, roughly comparable to the length of 3 football fields placed end to end. A missile impact on a structure of that scale would leave obvious physical scars. Massive craters would tear through the deck, fires would burn across the metal surface, and twisted sections of steel would be visible even from orbit. Damage of that magnitude cannot simply be hidden or cleaned up overnight. This is why satellite imagery quickly became central to the discussion. Beyond government surveillance systems, private companies also operate constellations of imaging satellites that regularly photograph ships traveling across the world's oceans. Among the vessels reportedly examined in this case was the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72. One of the United States Navy's most recognizable aircraft carriers. New satellite images appeared not long after the missile claims surfaced. When analysts studied those photographs carefully, the ship's flight deck looked entirely normal. There were no burn marks, no holes, and no visible structural damage. From above, the vessel appeared exactly as it should during routine operations at sea. Specialists did not rely only on static images. They also looked at the carrier's movement patterns. Satellites that monitor maritime traffic can follow ships across large distances, recording their positions at different times. If a vessel the size of an aircraft carrier had suffered major damage, its behavior would likely change. Engines might slow or stop. The ship might alter its route suddenly, or escorts might reposition themselves in unusual ways to assist a damaged flagship. Instead, the movement data suggested that the carrier continued traveling along its expected course without interruption. Its wake in the water remained steady and continuous, showing no sign that propulsion systems had been compromised. Another important clue came from aircraft activity on the deck. The effectiveness of any aircraft carrier depends on its ability to launch and recover planes. Satellite photographs taken after the alleged attack showed fighter jets parked in orderly rows on the deck and the launch systems appearing unobstructed. Later footage released by the U.S. military showed aircraft preparing for normal flight operations. If the deck had been hit by missiles, even a single crater could render parts of it unusable, making takeoffs and landings extremely dangerous. Yet everything visible suggested the ship was functioning normally. Electronic signals offered additional confirmation. A carrier strike group operates like a floating command center packed with sophisticated radar systems, communication arrays, and aircraft coordination networks. Among these are powerful sensors used to track aircraft and missiles across huge distances. The constant flow of radio and radar emissions from such systems can be detected and monitored by listening stations around the world. Enthusiasts and independent observers often track these signals as part of open-source intelligence efforts. If a catastrophic strike had disabled the carrier, analysts would likely notice sudden changes. Radar emissions might disappear, emergency frequencies might activate, or communications could become irregular. In this case, none of those warning signs appeared. The electronic signature associated with the carrier group remained stable and normal. Looking at the broader operational environment provided even more context. Aircraft carriers rarely operate alone. They travel as the centerpiece of a larger formation known as a carrier strike group. This formation typically includes guided missile destroyers, cruisers, supply ships, and sometimes submarines. The destroyers often carry sophisticated missile defense systems capable of intercepting incoming threats before they reach the carrier itself. If the carrier had been badly damaged, the escort ships would likely shift into emergency support roles, and additional aircraft might scramble to assist or protect the area. Observers monitoring the region did not report such unusual behavior. Logistics patterns also remained unchanged. Aircraft returning to a damaged carrier might require emergency refueling from tanker aircraft in the air if landing on the deck were impossible. This would lead to a surge in tanker activity from nearby bases in the Gulf region. Monitoring of flight movements from airfields in places such as Doha and Qatar or bases within the United Arab Emirates showed no unusual spike in refueling operations. Everything about the surrounding air activity looked routine. Iran did release footage showing missiles being launched, which created dramatic images that spread rapidly online. However, footage of launches does not prove that the weapons reached their intended targets. Without clear evidence of impact, infrared strike imagery, or other verifiable confirmation, the claim remains difficult to support. Launch videos simply demonstrate that missiles were fired, not where they ultimately landed. When analysts combined all of these pieces of evidence, satellite imagery, ship tracking data, flight operations, and radio signal monitoring, the most reasonable explanation emerged. Missiles may indeed have been launched toward the carrier group, but defensive systems likely intercepted them before they could cause damage. Warships escorting an aircraft carrier are equipped with advanced missile defense technology designed specifically for that purpose. When an interceptor destroys an incoming missile in the air, the resulting explosion can produce bright flashes that resemble impacts when viewed from far away. From a distance, it can be extremely difficult to tell whether a fireball represents a successful hit or simply a missile being destroyed midair. This confusion helps explain why conflicting claims spread so quickly. Yet beyond the technical debate about whether a missile actually struck the carrier lies a deeper issue about how modern conflicts unfold. Warfare today is not only about physical destruction, it is also about shaping narratives and influencing perception. Every statement released during a conflict carries strategic meaning. When one side claims a successful strike, it sends a message of strength and resilience. When the other side denies it, the goal is often to maintain credibility and deterrence. The truth can become fragmented across many sources of information: satellite photos, intercepted communications, radar data, and eyewitness reports. Independent investigators try to assemble these fragments into a coherent picture, but uncertainty often remains. In this case, the available evidence strongly suggests that the carrier itself was not damaged. Yet the debate continues because perception itself has strategic value. If people believe a powerful warship was vulnerable, that perception can influence public opinion and international politics even if the ship was never actually struck. Military decisions are rarely made for dramatic effect. Unlike the heroic portrayals often seen in films, real service members operate within strict procedures designed to minimize risk while achieving strategic objectives. Commanders must consider not only immediate combat outcomes, but also long-term consequences, including the safety of crews and the preservation of expensive military assets. Meanwhile, the broader conflict creates pressure beyond the battlefield. Modern wars require enormous quantities of resources. Precision weapons, guided bombs, missiles, and interceptors cost millions of dollars each. Every strike consumes equipment that must eventually be replaced through manufacturing and logistics. As a conflict drags on, the struggle can shift from individual battles to a larger contest of industrial capacity and endurance. Countries involved must maintain production lines capable of replacing weapons as quickly as they are used. Stockpiles shrink, factories work around the clock, and supply chains stretch across continents. Even the most technologically advanced militaries cannot sustain unlimited operations indefinitely. Eventually, the pace of production and the availability of resources begin to shape strategic choices. History shows that bombing campaigns alone rarely force a nation to collapse. Infrastructure may be damaged and military facilities destroyed, but political systems often survive external pressure longer than expected. Governments facing attacks from abroad frequently rally internal support rather than disintegrating. This creates difficult dilemmas for leaders deciding how far to escalate a conflict and how long to sustain it. At the same time, diplomatic maneuvering continues quietly behind the scenes. Meetings between world leaders, negotiations through intermediaries, and carefully crafted public statements all form part of the larger strategic landscape. In such moments, even small gestures, body language, tone of voice, timing of announcements, can send signals interpreted by governments thousands of kilometers away. Viewed from this perspective, the story surrounding the aircraft carrier becomes part of a much larger narrative. Whether or not missiles actually reach the ship may matter less than how the claim influences perceptions around the world. The vessel itself may continue sailing normally, but the discussion surrounding it reveals how modern conflict extends far beyond physical battlefields. Today, the arena of competition includes not only oceans and skies, but also factories producing weapons, media platforms spreading information, intelligence networks analyzing data, and diplomatic corridors where alliances are negotiated. The ship at the center of the controversy may remain unharmed, yet the broader struggle continues to unfold across multiple domains at once. In the end, the most decisive factors may not be a single missile strike or a dramatic explosion, but endurance, resources, and the ability of nations to manage both the physical and informational dimensions of war.